Hello and welcome to Simplify TV, the web series and podcast for agencies, marketers, media buyers, and business owners. I'm David McBee. Our guest today is Zeke Camusio, CEO at Data Speaks, an AI powered analytics platform that helps companies identify what drives their sales and helps them to invest in the right marketing strategies. Zeke is a serial entrepreneur with a background in economics and data science. He has spent the last 20 years developing AI, machine learning, and data analytics solutions, enabling hundreds of companies to make data driven decisions and accelerate growth. And we love talking about data here at Simplify TV. So, Zeke, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm super excited to hear what a data scientist has to say about all this. We have marketers on here all the time, so you seem like a little combo of the two. My question to you out of the gate is, what AI tools should marketers be using right now to improve their advertising performance?
Yeah, so I will talk about essentially not generative AI, in terms of creating creatives and content, but mostly in terms of understanding performance, right? And I think it's important to first explain that the way most advertisers do it these days doesn't really work. So trying to track individual users across the web on multiple channels, multiple devices with a third party pixel is a recipe for failure, right? So that's the challenge that we have as marketers. There's a long customer journey with multiple touch points, multiple devices, and we really need to figure out not only what channels the consumer interacted with, but also which ones actually influence the purchase or the conversion, right? Because to give you an example, it might be that if you have 100 conversions where the last touch point is, let's say, Google Ads branded search, well, maybe 50 of those people would have purchased anyway by clicking on the organic listing, right? So it doesn't, just because that touch point is in the journey, it doesn't necessarily mean that that drove additional conversions. So to answer your question, I think it's really important to measure the actual impact. So these days, there are essentially two essential technologies that we suggest, plus one optional one. So the two that you must have if you're investing at least, let's say, $25,000 a month, you need to have some form of media mix modeling, where you're taking in the spend for all your channels and mapping that out to the actual conversions that you get. And then you need to have a first party tracking technology that allows you to figure out individual behavior and then stream that back to platforms. The reason for that is that although that's not a very good way to understand return on ad spend or revenue, um, but it's very good for tracking all conversions, all user behavior, because third-party pixels, drop about 40% of the data. So by tracking with the first-party pixel, then you can stream to all the platforms, and capture all the conversions. So whether it's Google Ads or Meta or programmatic, track with your own pixel and then stream back to the platforms. And then the third, if you're investing, let's say, $100,000 or more per month, you need to have some form of incrementality testing technology that allows you to do holdout tests, scale up tests, and really measure the incremental value that you get when you turn up or turn down certain channels.
So, what you're really talking about is measuring customers across the entire purchase journey, right? And we actually talk about that quite a bit here at Simplify because, we do streaming television, we do display advertising, and we feel like those influence users to go to Google and then do a Google search, and then Google takes all the credit, right? So how can marketers actually understand which channels and campaigns are driving their sales, and is AI the solution?
Yes. So we have to understand that the attribution windows that platforms have are arbitrary. So let's say the default is 7-day click, 1-day view. Well, that's essentially ignoring anything prior to that. So it's really overvaluing bottom of funnel channels, and totally undervaluing what happens at the top of the funnel. So any kind of awareness ads that you run on TikTok or Meta or Instagram, YouTube, programmatic, connected TV, OTT, right? Like all that stuff is really being ignored because it didn't happen within that window. So you really need to measure actual impact. And what I mean by actual impact is that, let's say that you have campaign A and campaign B, you double your presence in campaign A and your sales stay the same. Well, there might be a correlation between those two things, but there's certainly not an impact because your sales or conversions didn't increase. But then you increase campaign B and you see your sales increase, right? So that's really measuring impact. And that's a very simplistic way to look at it, because it's modeling that is essentially very, very one of the most difficult problems, even for data scientists, because you have saturation effects. The more you spend, the lower the ROAS is. You have the carryover effect. So if you run certain ads today, some people are going to convert today, some people next week, some people next month. And then you have the interaction between channels. So as you said, as you run more programmatic, then there's more people searching for your brand on Google. So a good model needs to be able to not only explain past data, but predict future behavior, no matter what the circumstances are. So you should perform well in 1,000 different scenarios as you tweak your marketing mix all over the place.
Let's talk about television specifically. So 30 years ago, if a brand ran a television campaign, there was really no way to measure it other than did sales increase, right? And then today they run a streaming TV campaign and they're trying to measure every little impact. Is there somewhere in the middle between having a little bit of faith that the advertising is responsible for the increase in sales and having evidence that the advertising is increasing sales?
Yeah. So as a data scientist, I don't have a lot of faith in things. I have to
That's
like
fair.
see. Yeah. So I had to see things work or not work, right? So now it's important to understand that, as you said, you can over rely on something that doesn't work very well. So if you're like, for example, you run ads with a promotion code, not everybody's going to use the promotion code, right? If you run ads for a certain zip code, maybe people from that zip code will tell their friends that live across the country about your product. So that might not be able to. You might not be able to measure individuals, right? But what you need to be able to measure is what happens to my output, which is sales or conversions, when I change one of the inputs. And that's why I mean, like, you have all these different levers that you can tweak. And first of all, it's important to do that by design. So you don't want to increase 5 different channels the same week, because then if you see an increase, it's going to be very difficult to pinpoint which one caused the increase. But if you do it by design, staggered over time, and you measure, you target different geolocations, and you do it with the right technology in place, you should be able to get very accurate information. And it's also important to like know that nothing is 100% accurate. But just because it's not 100% accurate, it doesn't mean that it's useless, right? So the way I see it is, um, if you're like, let's take GPS for example. We used to be able to get to places by asking around or looking at maps. Now GPS is a more effective technology. Every now and then they mess up, but it's a significant improvement from trying to wing it every time.
All right, so what's the answer? Is there an AI tool out there that can help an advertiser to know which levers to pull and measure what happened?
Yeah. So if what you're trying to determine is the performance for every channel and campaign, and how to optimally allocate all your marketing budget towards the things that are going to have the best return on investment. Really, what you need is a very sophisticated media mix modeling technology that doesn't depend on individual pixels and is able to track impact. And as we said, takes into consideration the carryover effect, saturation effects, the impact of channels on other channels, all those interaction effects, and that the way we describe it is that it's not enough for the model to attribute past data well, but if a model is actually describing the underlying causal relationship of the world that we live in, it should be able to predict what's going to happen tomorrow. So if you have a ROAS of 5 for TV ads, that should mean that if you increase your spend by $10,000, your revenue will increase by 50,000. And a good model will look at that, analyze the gap between the prediction it made, the actual performance, and then continue updating those predictions so they become increasingly more accurate over time. Um, that solution you can build in-house. There are some solutions that are built for you right out of the gate. DataSpeaks is one of them. There's a few others. Recast is a great solution. Northbeam is another great solution. So there are vendors out there. As the CEO of DataSpeaks, I'm certainly biased, but what you get working with us is we're a team of data scientists that will build a custom attribution model for each client. So we take everything that you do into consideration: your customer segments, your product mix, your channel mix, and we build something that helps you answer the questions you have and buy the best media possible.
Do you have any examples you can share with us without necessarily naming the business of how you implemented your models and made a significant improvement to their bottom line?
Yes, we have several case studies that I can share on the website. I think that given the scope of the interview, I can't get into a lot of details. But what I can say is that we found that on average, there's a 22% inefficiency in every new client that we start working with. That means that without spending more, by reallocating the existing budget to the right channels and campaigns, they can get 22% more revenue. So without really spending more, just by having better intel to act on.
That's a powerful stat. Awesome. All right. Well, I learned a lot here. I think this was really valuable for our brands and our agencies. Really appreciate you. What is the best way for people to get in touch with you?
You can drop me a line at Zeke, that's Zeke, at dataspeaks.ai, or you can learn more about Dataspeaks at dataspeaks.ai.
Perfect. Zeke, thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And thank you guys for watching Simplify TV. Please help us out with a like, a comment, a review. Be sure to follow or subscribe to be informed about new episodes. Simplify TV is sponsored by Simplify, helping you to maximize relevance and multiply results with our industry-leading media buying and workflow solutions. For more information, visit simply.fi. Thanks for joining us today. I'm David McBee. Be awesome, and we'll see you next time.